Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Vanity Metrics, brought to you by Ziff Davis and Looker. I am Karen Bannon and I'll be your moderator. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd just like to remind everyone that slides will advance automatically throughout our event, and you can come back to this recording at any time using the link that you were provided. So for truly data-driven companies, data is part of the very fabric of the business, woven into every moment of every day. But you only find success if you use the right metrics that can inform decisions. That said, during today's event, our expert will discuss why it's important to go beyond reporting on high-level trends in your business to deeper metrics that drive strategy and growth. He'll also talk about how to amplify the use of data by moving beyond dashboards and integrating data delivery into employee tools and technology. Finally, he'll discuss what it takes to create a data-driven culture with measurable impact on your business. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our expert, Gerard White. Gerard is an enterprise data analyst at Looker based in London. He works alongside enterprise clients across a range of verticals, including retail, manufacturing, and marketing, to define data and analytics strategy and transform organizational data culture. And with that, let's get started. Gerard, I'd like to turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Gerard White. I'm an enterprise data analyst at Looker, based in London. And today we're going to be looking at the concept of vanity metrics, or rather, hopefully not looking at vanity metrics, and actually start looking at metrics that inform decisions, right? That we can actually do things with. We're going to start by looking at dashboards, then moving into the concept of vanity metrics themselves. I'm going to talk you guys through a few case studies that we've actually seen in the field, a few things we can learn from, and then finally we're going to talk about how we can do it ourselves, right, in our own businesses and enterprises. So if you haven't heard of Looker, Looker is a business intelligence platform, big data analytics platform that helps you explore, analyze, and share real-time business insights for users in every department. So Looker basically services data out when and where it's needed. And we work with a bunch of clients, from traditional enterprises to cutting-edge data disruptors. Now, we're going to stop looking at vanity metrics and start looking at metrics that matter. And when many of us think about BI or data or analytics, we often start here, right? The dashboard, everybody loves dashboards, right? Dashboards are very, very good in many, many ways. They're often the most accessible and the most appealing area of analytics and data. And dashboards are really good for a few different reasons, right? The first one is that they're highly engaging, right? As I just mentioned, dashboards are highly visual, and they appeal to really everyone, right? From the marketing user who wants to see like a big green arrow pointing at the sky, all the way down to the hardened data analyst who wants to see a little bit more detail in a pivot table, right? Like, dashboards can contain lots of different kind of visualizations and appeal to large swathes of people. Dashboards also inspire focus. So if I'm looking at a dashboard and the dashboard is telling me that the number of widgets that we produced last month has gone up, well, that tells me, if I was a brand new employee of that company, that maybe the number of widgets going up is important, and that we should all be sort of striving toward making that higher. So dashboards can inspire an organizational or a departmental focus. And finally, dashboards are often the beginning of what we might call a data-driven culture, right? And this is kind of the idea of putting data front and center, right? The idea that data itself is truth. In comparison to, say, a highly manicured PowerPoint file or some kind of executive summary, the idea of data being true and front and center is the beginnings of data culture. So dashboards are great, but they have a few limitations. We mentioned that they're highly engaging, but they're often too broad. If you think about maybe a dashboard that you've looked at recently or that you've worked on recently, if you think about all the kind of metrics that are on there and really think about who can actually affect those metrics, like tomorrow, it's usually not too many people, right? The number of widgets has increased. Well, that's probably the result of lots of different departments. And it's often at too high a level for anyone to actually feel empowered that they're actually driving those metrics. In an effort to appeal to everyone, sometimes we end up appealing to no one. Dashboards are often also a little static, right? And this is because they're often seen as the result or the end result of an analytical process or an analytical journey. And businesses aren't static, right? If you're a retailer, for example, right, what's important to you in, let's say, December, which is, getting product out the door, is not the same thing as what's important to you in January, right, which is preventing it from coming back through those doors. But dashboards, because they're the end result of this analytical pipeline, teams typically aren't fast enough or agile enough to update dashboards to reflect the needs of the business, which can change, every day or even every hour, depending on the industry. And finally, dashboards are often vain. We often focus on what feels good instead of what we need. And again, if you think about a dashboard that you've seen recently with some of those high-level metrics, often dashboards, we've got this idea, everything's going up, everything's great. And sure, right, that's nice to see, but it doesn't really help us do our jobs better, right? This concept of vanity in a dashboard is something I want to explore in a little bit more detail. And to do this, I'm going to use an example that hopefully most of us can relate to, and it's this. This is an A, right? Now maybe you got an A at school, or a B or a C. That's fine. But an A is a good example of what we might call a vanity metric. So why is this? Well, if you think about everyone who can use this A, right? Who can really use the A? What can we do with it? Well, there are a few different people who could use the A. A teacher might use this A because they're maybe sorting students into kind of different levels of ability or different classes. So they're going to use the A's and the B's and the C's and the D's to kind of organize those students and group them up. A university or a college might want to use this A because they're deciding which student who is going to get into which particular course or class or degree. So the university can use the A. And even stepping back further, like governments can use these A's, right, because they want to aggregate further and look at average scores to maybe allocate areas of funding, etc. A lot of people can use this A, right, the student's grade, with one kind of exception, and that's the student, because while the student, it's great that they know they have an A, the A doesn't tell them anything about why they're getting an A, about what's working, and most importantly, it doesn't tell them anything about how they can get from an A to an A+, right? It's a very sort of reflective metric. Now, if I'm the student, and let's say I'm going to class and I'm studying and I'm doing these exams, but I'm not getting that A+. Well, I might want to know a few different things, right? Like, why am I not getting an A+? I might want to look at some different metrics regarding how I'm behaving in let's say, an exam. So maybe, for example, I'm doing the exam too quickly and I'm making kind of careless mistakes, right? So my average points per question is going down. Or maybe I'm spending way too long at the start of the exam and I'm over-answering questions, and as a result, I'm missing a bunch of questions at the end, right? So the percentage of exam missed might be a more useful metric for me. And maybe I want to look at this, like in French and German and math and history and cut from a few different angles. And if I know the answers to those particular metrics, well, now I can start to do something about it, right? Maybe I need to actively force myself to answer the questions faster, or move on when I need to. But knowing the A by itself doesn't really give me much to improve it with. And so the A could be looked at as a vanity metric here. And we get our taste for vanity metrics at school, and we do bring them with us into work. So what does a vanity metric look like in an operational or an organizational sense? Well, there are a few sort of common vanity metrics we might want to point at. Total revenue, daily active users, customer acquisition cost. They're all very, very good metrics, right? They all give you the idea of the success of an organization, but they don't help all that much in actually helping us do our jobs better, right? They don't aid in making good decisions. Now, again, that's not to say these metrics aren't useful, right? But they have a very different purpose. They're used to compare organizations, between each other, but not actually run them. And over-focusing on these kind of metrics can be dangerous. Our goal is to help people do their jobs better with useful metrics, and focusing on this concept of vanity tends to not help people. So we want to go beyond vanity metrics and into metrics that we can really do something with. And this requires thought. This requires some deep thought, and it's obviously very different depending on the industry that you're in. But what I'm going to do is maybe call these operational metrics, right? And they have a few things in common. The first one is that they give visibility over direct experience, right? They reflect, let's say, the experience of a customer or a vendor or the people who are paying the bills. They reflect reality. They're quite low level, and we can look at them from many angles, right? Maybe we want to look at them over time, and then quickly just look at Friday and look at that by hour, and then quickly just take that and look at that by platform or version or location or zip code. In BI, we call those dimensions. And then finally, and really importantly here, operational metrics inspire action, right? You'll hear me say that our job is to help people do their jobs better. People should be empowered to take action on these metrics and actually do something to move the needle on these metrics. And if enough people move enough needles on enough operational metrics, then I can guarantee that those high-level vanity metrics on the top-level dashboard, well, they'll take care of themselves. Now, I think operational metrics are really well illustrated with a few examples. So we're going to step through a few of those. The first one, I'd like you to imagine maybe like a mobile phone sort of based taxi company, right? Like one of those like ride-sharing apps. Now, an obvious kind of metric for the success of one of these apps is monthly active users, right? How many people are ordering trips in a particular month or week or day or quarter, whatever that might be. And while that's a useful metric for telling us the success of the organization, put yourself in the shoes of maybe a dispatch operations manager or an ops manager or a marketing professional, right? Maybe we want to actually look at something that reflects reality and reflects the experience of our customer. Now, to do that, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of a customer. So let's imagine we're ordering a cab. We take out our phone and it says that it's going to be 15 minutes to pick up. So you wait 15 minutes and it now says 10. You can imagine that's probably not a nice experience for the customer. And if that happens, once, twice, 3 times, well, the likelihood of me using that service again is lower. And as a result, that monthly active users number, well, it's going to drop in time. Whereas if minutes to pick up is a healthy level, well, that's something that is good for the company. And we can directly affect minutes to pick up, right, by moving taxis around or changing expectations, etc. The second example is maybe a food delivery company. So again, maybe a kind of a similar idea. I'm hungry, and I want some food, so I order some food, and it says that it's on its way, and I'm waiting, and it's not there yet, and I'm getting hungrier, and maybe the food arrives or the wrong food arrives, and it's late. Again, knowing that the company is doing thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of orders per month, well, that's great. But if I'm having a late delivery as a customer every time, I'm less inclined to use the service. The final example here is maybe the example of like a publisher, right? An online publisher, maybe an app maker or a games maker. The metric that you'll often see in those industries is daily active users, right? DAU. But if I'm a customer, well, I'm having a good experience because I'm in the app or I'm reading the content. I'm spending time, engaging with that content, because if I'm on the website, well, I'm reading it, and I'm reading it because I like it, as opposed to just sort of clicking on it. And so minutes in app, maybe percentage scrolled, might be a useful metric in this case. Now, great operational metrics have a few things in common, and as I mentioned, they're very different depending on the industries that we're in. But a nice place to start is by really stepping back, right, and define what it is we're trying to measure. Now, you should think about that irrespective of whether you can measure it or not, right? Don't think about the data or the databases or the team or the legacy system that you've inherited, right? What is it we're trying to measure? Very blue sky. And from there, how can we understand that with data, right? Now, this isn't always easy, and it's not always available directly, right? I'll give you an example of maybe customer health or customer happiness. That's not something that's actually easy to measure directly. But if you can't measure customer happiness, well, maybe we can measure customer unhappiness, right? Maybe there's a support line or a complaints line that we're monitoring and we can see, and maybe there's a few other factors, right? Maybe the percentage of late orders or the number of times the users logged in, et cetera, that we can kind of combine together and aggregate up into building this idea of customer health or customer happiness. And then finally, we want to track these metrics that we're building over time and monitor how they're getting on, because these kind of metrics aren't one and done, right? Your business will evolve and grow and change over time. You'll get new data sources, the market will change, you'll get a new CEO, and locking these metrics down isn't great, right? We want to make sure that they reflect reality, and that means that we may have to update and evolve them as time goes on. And we can use those, of course, to build better metrics. So I've got two examples that we've actually seen in the field here on the contrast between vanity metrics and operational metrics. The first one I'm going to talk about is a case study by a game called Two Dots. Two Dots is a delightful mobile game where it's like a leveler, right? So you play the game and you want to play the game and not get too annoyed so that you leave it. But it shouldn't be too easy that it's not challenging at all, right? In this kind of freemium model, I guess this is generally the business model, and it's the result of continuous redesign and rebalancing, right? Again, too hard and people give up, too easy and people get bored. Now, if you looked in the industry, right, the mobile gaming industry or the app industry, you'll see that there are two metrics that really are the big hitters here, and that's revenue and new installs, right? New users. And these are really important metrics to the industry, right? And rightly so. They're being used in this case on this slide to compare different apps or different studios together, right? However, they are vanity metrics, right? Because there's nothing about new installs or revenue that can really help a product manager or an app developer do their jobs better. I'll show you an example. If you can imagine each one of these bars as representing a level in the game. So the level of the completion rate for the level, right? And you'll notice there are three dips here. So it looks like level 17 and level 30 and level 47 here. They've got much lower completion rates than the other levels. And what's happening is that users are having difficulty finishing these levels. And each one of these troughs potentially represents users, closing the app and never opening it again. That's not great. And so the completion rate for those particular levels is down. And so if we're looking at completion rate, this would be the operational metric, right? This is something we can do something with. We can use this metric to go to our product team or go to our level designers and redesign the level. And so we can push this update out and physically do something with that data. And when that happened, the success rate of those particular levels went back up in line with the rest of the game. and people kept playing as normal. Second example I'd like to talk about is Venmo. If you're not familiar with Venmo, it's a super slick payment app. It allows users to make payments to their friends or contacts, and also request a payment from their friends and contacts, right? And they were going through this exercise where they were redesigning their user interface, right? They were redesigning their app for a nicer user experience, right? And so they made a change from version 5 to version 6 here. And I won't go into too much detail, but you'll notice that users are able to both pay and charge people. And they were able to see from the data that most people were paying people. So they kind of moved those buttons up to the top and made pay the default, made it a little bit more message-like. And when they did this, the number of payments went up. Right, which is great, right? If we're looking at the success of this app or this platform, we might be fooled into thinking that the number of payments is an accurate reflection of the success of this update. And so all was good for a while, but then somewhat anecdotally, we started to notice, Venmo started to notice some kind of customer messages come in on their help desk, where people were sending messages in or sending payments accidentally, right? Because the user interface had introduced some sort of confusing things for them, and they were accidentally sending money when they didn't really mean to. As it turned out, the number of mistakes was increasing as well. Now, this was something that we were able to actively model in their BI stack, right, using Looker, but the number of mistakes in this case is more representative of the behavior we're trying to prevent. The number of mistakes is the operational metric here. So what happened was that we went back to the drawing board, the product team went back to the drawing board, and they were able to cut that metric, right, the number of mistakes, or rather the percentage of mistakes, by app version over time. And you can see here that the orange bar is spiking immediately over time, right? So this represents the release of that particular version of the software. And so they went back to the drawing board, played around with the UI a little bit more, and then, of course, they could see the results of that change in real time, cutting it up by version. And you'll notice the green bar is much lower than the orange one right here in terms of the number of mistakes. And of course, act and refine, right? There's still work to do, and there's always work to do on refining these metrics. But having like a centralized model is a really good place to start. So we've talked a little bit about dashboards, Vanity Metrics, and a few case studies. How can we do this for ourselves, right? Well, there are kind of two main parts to this. The first one is data, and the second one is culture. Now, I'm going to start with data. There are a few things that we can do from a tech perspective or a data perspective to help us out. The first one is to get a suitable data stack. And we tend to see the trend toward data centralization in the BI and data analytics space, right? Get a fast database, typically cloud-based, typically elastic, typically what we call an MPP database, and put your data in there for the purposes of reporting, right? Make this your data warehouse. Make this your single source of truth. And don't worry too much about getting that data ready as we've had to do, decades prior, right, due to the limitations of the technology. Build a data model and let it do the lifting and shifting, right? So, for example, the number of mistakes. That can be very easily defined in a data model. It can be centralized in one place, which allows us to examine that from a few different perspectives. And use what's out there, right? So in analytics in particular, if you're asking a question, chances are you're not the first person to ask. I'm sure it may be a different industry or a different set of technologies, but often the questions get repeated, and so use what's out there. A few kind of examples that are fun to do from the data perspective are like a funnel analysis, right? So let's say we're a retailer, number of purchases might be useful, but it is slightly vain. Number of basket abandonments might be something we can do something about, right? Because if somebody adds something to the basket and then they don't purchase, well, hey, let's email them a voucher. Let's pick up the phone. Let's do something about it to turn that into a purchase. We can, of course, do more advanced analytical things like retention analysis and cohorting as well. On the culture side, This requires a little bit more thought, because data and tech are relatively easy compared to people, I think. Data is like a sense, right? Like this stuff is new to many, many people, right? Giving data in this kind of format across the organization is new and actually can be terrifying to some people. And so have patience, right? Show empathy. Make sure that your reporting systems and your the way you're exposing that data out, be they metric names or dimension names or report names, etc., are as business friendly and collaborate with the business as much as possible, right? But really show empathy. The role of the data team and the traditional data analyst is also changing and evolving over time. In a world of self-service data analytics, the role of the analyst has never been more important, but our roles are changing into that of teacher and advisor and advocate and coach, right? Because we're more familiar with data, right? We're using it all the time. So be the advocate and not the instrument, right? And what really works well is showing people what's possible, right? Because often, people want to have access to data themselves. So you know what? Instead of building a report for somebody, how about you go around, say hi, and show them how they can do it themselves. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Culture takes a little bit of time to change, but you can get there. A few things you can do to really push that data culture out there is to put data where it's needed, right? And I started with dashboards, picking on dashboards a little bit. Dashboards are a great place to start, but increasingly people are using other services and systems in their day-to-day life. So on the left here, I personally live in Slack or an instant messaging system. So wouldn't it be great if I could just quickly run a little chatbot and get my data right in Slack in an environment that's already collaborative, and I'm already talking to my audience in there. So insert data in there. Salespeople live in Salesforce. They live in their CRMs. So take a dashboard, take a report, and embed it. Bring the data to where it's needed. Don't rely on someone having to go in and run a report in a BI tool. Utilize the idea of the data platform. And so wrapping up here, we've talked about defining useful metrics, right? Those operational metrics over vanity metrics. These are not what's easy, but it's what we need. They require a little bit of thought and they reflect desired behavior, right, and reality. We can utilize the idea of a data model, which really multiplies the value of the data, right? Instead of having a table just full of payments, we can augment that with the data model to have payments and the percentage of mistakes and look at that from a few different perspectives. It also allows for rapid evolution so you can update the data model as your requirements and priorities shift and evolve as a business. And finally, we talked about getting it out there, right? Putting the data in your users' hands, surface it everywhere, be that in Slack or Salesforce or your BI tool or via an email PDF or something like that. And you know what, finally, back to those dashboards at the start, if you can keep those TV dashboards and it gets people interested in data, well, that's good for all of us. So keep those TV dashboards. They're a great place to start. And that wraps up. I'd like to pass back to Karen at this stage.
Thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us today for our special web event, Beyond Vanity Metrics. I am Karen Bannon, and on behalf of Gerard White, Looker, and everyone at the Ziff Davis family of publications, thank you for your time and have a great day.